to experiment with. You had heard Edgar talking about the Blackfriars and the original one and its relation to our original globe, how the globe was the second best option, probably. And in that sense, that even at that time, when we're looking at it, it's a really interesting question, innovation at that time. Yeah, was the Blackfriars an innovation? You had heard Edgar talk and or was the creation of the globe about that even at that time when we're looking at it, it's a really interesting question, innovation at that time. Yeah, was the Blackfriars an innovation? You had heard Edgar talk and or was the creation of the globe about that even at that time when we're looking at it, it's a really interesting question, innovation at that time. Yeah, was the Blackfriars an innovation? You had heard and or was the creation of the globe about even at that time when we're looking at it, it's a really interesting question, innovation at that time. Yeah, was the Blackfriars an innovation? You had heard and or was the creation of the globe about even at that time when we're looking at it, it's a really interesting question, innovation at that time. Was the Blackfriars an innovation? You had heard and or was the creation of the globe about even at that time when we're looking at it, it's a really interesting question, innovation at that time. Was the Blackfriars an innovation? You had heard and or was the creation of the globe about even at that time when we're looking at it, it's a really interesting question, innovation at that time. Was the Blackfriars an innovation? You had heard and or was the creation of the globe when we're looking at it, it's a really interesting question, innovation at that time. Was the Blackfriars an innovation? The original stage and staging. A new and disturbing Shakespeare would be created by taking the plays back to their original theatre. So this is really significant, I think, as when we have debates or about what's happening at the globe, or indeed as tradition and scholarly practice changes, because it's a changeable practice, so there's no problem with it because it changes. But it's always, I think, important to refer back, especially when we're thinking about the fundamental concept that underlies the building reconstruction, refer back always to the original motivation to reconstruct it and evaluate all arguments, pro or con, against it. Yeah? We can say that, in the original proposal to reconstruct, we think that this particular element of the argument is relevant as far as we are aware now, or according to our current knowledge, or this particular element of the argument is not so valid according to how knowledge developed. But it's not, I don't think that it's either fair or honest in a scholarly way not to refer to it, okay? Because this is why the whole thing was happening, and it keeps as the basic reason for reconstruction. Yeah. So to quote Secretary Rumsfeld, who I'm sure you remember with great pleasure and affection, the known knowns and the unknown unknowns. So just a few factors before the debate itself. What is it that we know about the current situation or controversy? There are so many things that we don't know in terms of this situation. We are in a sea of the unknown. There's loads of it that we don't know about, why MRIs was suspended. But we do know a few things. And one of them is that the Globe Board issued a statement on artistic direction. It's a few paragraphs, but I think you can challenge me later on it, but I think that one of the key points of it is that they're going to return to shared light productions from 2018 to enable experiment to go further. This is a really important statement to make, but there are so many questions about it. I leave those questions in the air for now, but there's lots. From 2018. So, I'm sure it's got to do, or I guess it's got to do with labour relations, or you know, with the contract with the artistic director herself. Situation, you have to admit it. Yeah, we have a huge furore, you know, lots of nasty things being said on both sides, and then the situation is going to, it's like a divorce, it's going to continue for another year and a half, and what's going to happen in the meantime? You know. So it's a risky situation. I assume, I'd be happy to hear if somebody knows more. I assume that what's going to happen is that give Emma free rein until April 2018 to sort of experiment with her own style of productions, and then they change to the shared light after that. Still, what do they mean by shared light is quite, it's not so, it's quite plain what it means. We turn on the lights if they're needed, the house lights, and we're not going to touch the button until the performance ends. That's what shared light would mean. So we're not changing it for artistic purposes. That's the definition of shared light. But experiment, what do we mean by experiment? If we, the first part of the article in which this statement is, the first part of it is a glorification of Emma Rice. I don't mean it in a pejorative way, but for her success. And indeed she had box office success. For her experiment, you know, with these productions in the same article. And then the same article says we are going to return to shared light from 2018 to enable experiment. So you see the contradiction. There's no more extension to that notion. It's a short article, but still, I think that's very much something that the Globe owes to the community, scholarly community, to explain what they mean. So if Emma's experiment is an experiment, what do we mean by experiment with shared light? Is it contradictory or not? Another thing that we do know is what Sam Wanamaker said himself on the purpose of reconstruction that you heard before. In another article, he says that such a space should shock the actor, and through the actor, the spectator. So the it is absolutely fine to do plays in styles, I think, at these theatres, because they are to a certain extent regularly with the reason that it was reconstructed for. Yeah, and that is exploring this notion, in what way could it be that an actor, wanted to reconstruct a space and intuitive, based on his expert knowledge as an actor, theatre person, that this space should shock the actor. And I've seen when I was working there, not on the stage like some lucky people, but as actors work there in rehearsal, that it does shock the actor. So if the actor is being led by the director, then they come out on that stage into the space, and the first feeling is shock, in the sense that absolutely unusual setup, and you feel exposed. Wherever you turn, there's people everywhere, not just horizontally, vertically as well. So incredible. So that is a shock, and if it's a shock for the actor, they have to use their skills differently. In fact, they have to develop new skills that they haven't got yet. And because of that, the play itself will come across differently, and so it should shock the spectator. So when we evaluate the whole notion of reconstruction and or productions in it, it's really important to again remember that statement. Was it shocking? In what sort of way? And does it have anything to do with the environment that it was produced in? Okay. I suggest to you as a footnote that if you black out the environment, it's not going to help in evaluating how nasty it is. Very quickly, something else that we do know as well, that as the reconstruction was going on at that time, scholars were articulating their reasons for doing this, and as they envisioned it going forward. Because it's not just, so it's important, as Andrew Gurr says there, that the reconstruction is not a finished project. As I said in the beginning when I was referring to experimental archaeology, the object is not finished when it's there. We reconstruct it as a first step in order to be used. And it's not just that we do something in front of it, but we do something with it. So it's almost something that you take in your hand and you have to use it. If you can't use it this way because it doesn't yield, it's not handy, then I'm saying, oh, I always do it this way, but apparently it's not made for that. I have to use it, with my other hand. So reconstruction, and then as they envisioned the process going forward, the use of it with expert knowledge, acting, was envisioned to be even more important, yielding information. Something else that we know, that's from current knowledge, at last a hard fact. I was relieved when I was wading through the articles about the current problem. Mark Rylance finally came up with something tangible that could have been a problem instead of just personal animosities between the director and the board. Is that the rigging was too elaborate to be moved, he says. So basically he says one of the problems was that once the technical equipment was installed at the Globe for the metamanized production, for example, that prohibited any other style of production for that year to take place. And that may have been a particular problem. Ralph Cohen, who was the artistic director / director of mission of the Blackfriars Theatre, has also an important article online. And I think I included that in my description of the session. And in that he argues that indeed shared light is experimental in today's terms. Okay, in today's terms, because it's, as I said, a way of working, a basic working condition that was used at that time, and that generates an entirely different set of knowledge when it's put in practice. So in that sense, it is experimental. So there's a strong opinion from the constructive theatres today, commercial theatre. And something else that we do know is from performance theory, so it's worth always sometimes to glance aside to what we theorized so far in the current state of time about these things. And can we move one, please? According to Richard Schechner, founder of performance theory, space is the first frame, he says. And that's an important notion to ponder in relation to these things, and again, keeping it at the back of our mind. So Schechner gives this diagram about this, so it's a very, very sketchy one, it needs more elaboration, but the basic things are there. So this is what it is. When I produce a play, then the first basic condition that I need to see or map out is the kind of space I'm going to use. What shape is it, and where is the audience in relation to it? What configuration is it? And that determines, in important ways, whatever else is needed to make up that production, textual aspects, and the action itself, what the actors do, yeah. But all of these things, the important thing to see is that they do not happen side by side. This is the hierarchy of their makeup. So, space is the first frame of performance, but because of that, important notion is that it's also the first frame for composition. Yeah. So the reason why we might not be aware of it today is that in your own time, your kind of theatre, the style of theatre that's predominant, is taken as received. So we don't think about it. It's naturalized. We don't reflect on it. But if you were a playwright, surely when you start composing, you have to envision the whole thing. So you start like that. Okay. 1 hour exactly, if possible. Oh, sorry, that's in the presentation. If you go on the internet bit, yeah, the Firefox, yeah, and the iPlayer on the right. Sorry, I was not there. Yeah, yeah, it's on the top. How many of you have seen it? Right, okay. Just to give you a flavor of 2 minutes. Yep, and if you go for 1 hour, maybe. Yeah, that was it. Just to give you a flavor of what.
Can you have a bit louder? Is it possible louder?
This is the loudest. Yeah, doesn't need to be exact. Okay. So when I saw the production first, this is what came to my mind. That why I liked it, what I liked in it. For example, I think that the globe needed a few things, definitely, or globe-type spaces, and one of those things is definitely the movement, the range of movement, and the range of the acting skills that are being used. And it very much reminded me of even the burlesque elements in the production of something I've seen before, and there's something I remember it was very much commedia that was contemporary practice with Shakespeare and in similar conditions. So there are some aspects that I find were really important in Emma Rice's productions that are important to infuse the globe use with, and this is one of them. Do you want to go one down? Bawdiness and the rest of it that you saw in the clip from the Midsummer Night's Dream, and there's lots of it, I tell you, non-stop, is also, or can be, if used, for constructive reasons, or as used in commedia, can be a relevant practice. So it has its place. Go one down, please. Or just the beauty of it, of this range of movement and the use of color, I think, which was really, really important. And you heard Emma talking about audience relationship in that way as well. So the range of movement very much has to do with drumming up audience involvement. So this is really important. When I took students to the Globe, that was a production of, I think, The Winter's Tale quite a few years back, and I asked for responses to the performance, and one student said that the actors didn't move, and I wasn't moved. And I thought that was really well put, because the range of movement and the skill with which the actor moves and uses the space has an enormous amount to do with involving the audience in what is happening, and also constructing the whatever the play wants to achieve. You also heard her talking about a controversial issue, which quite a few of the articles that were written about the problem mentioned, which is her relationship to the text. It's not only that the play is cut, or there are interpolations, there are modern language interpolations into it, which are very much foregrounded, so they are not there in order to, quite a lot of them, in order to ease just understanding of the spoken language, but to point out the fact that it doesn't always need to be exactly Shakespeare as it was written or composed. But an important aspect of textual modifications is a structural one, where she changed, for example, the sex of one of the sets of lovers. So Helena became Helenus. And that is a more difficult problem. You can do it. She's known for being a great adapter of plays and of various sources, so she is known as an adapter, so that's not to be wondered at that she's doing this. And there can be reasons for it. If you look at it in terms of Shakespeare's plays, a question which can be debated, whether it helps to achieve what the play wanted to achieve as a composition, not as Shakespeare wanted it, so to speak, or does it take us to a different direction, and or does it muddle the meaning of the play because the structural aspects are changed in a way that does not help understanding in a clear way. So it's all to be questioned. And then she talks about the use of space as well. The reporter was, the interviewer was asking her about the very dynamic relationship of the actors with the audience. And she says, yes, that's why I put out the tables in the yard so that they can access the audience. And you can tell that the actors are enjoying this. So that is, again, really, really important, I think, to be adopted by these kinds of theatres. This is really, really important. The question is, do we do it by modifying the space, which is using the lights and putting out objects like the tables, like different things that Dominic Drumble was fond of doing, or not? And the interesting issue is, and again, to be debated, is that if you put out various objects for the access space directly, then performance theory says, Marvin Carson, for example, is that if I go into the audience as a contacting them as another person, so to speak, invade their space, invade their personal space, not their architectural space, but their personal space, it can put people off. So does it help me as an actor or a director or a performance maker if I put certain people off? Or do I work at audience contact by invading their architectural space or surrounding space and contact them there with a different use of movement and body? So it is difficult. And audience contact was there, it was very, very strong. The only thing that was missing is that what does the globe have to do with it? Because you couldn't see it. And so this was on many, many levels. What I mean is there was a very dynamic and involving and enjoyable production and challenging in many ways. There was a person or an actor in a wheelchair, for example, earlier. There's a 50-50 gender parity almost in casting. There's involvement, colour, music, sound, everything, except theatre why it was reconstructed as the creative constraint of creating those levels of involvement that she managed to achieve. So my question to you is, again, how many of you saw the production? 1 and 2.
The audience. In fact, we have played there, and it has a very good effect, but you don't have to write a play particularly for that. They take plays that have been in proscenium arched theatres and they put them there.
Yeah.
And with a little bit of adaptation, it works. So it's interesting, it's quite like that. But if people don't like to, you were talking about how people didn't like the fact that they were so near, maybe, some of them, well, they can sit further back. So they don't have to be right up against the actor.
This nearness is very much invading your personal space. Yeah. So if at the orange tree, this would be something if I sit next to you as an actor, for example, or as happens here, if I have a banana and have somebody eat it and things like that. So was it involvement in that way?
Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
But often not,
yeah.
But they still are right here in front of you.
But that's not peculiar to Emma Rice's productions, is it? I mean, ever since the Globe opened, actors have been invading, as you put it, invading that space. And of course, as much in the text of Elizabethan and Jacobean plays to suggest that there was plenty of that going on. There was certainly a lot of verbal invasion going on in the sense that actors were commenting directly in derogatory terms to the audience. So, I mean, there's nothing
Oh no, and this is something fundamental that should happen. What I'm saying is that there's many things that we don't know yet how this works in a shared light environment, because as I said, in Emerice's production, the audience involvement was very intense, but it was a slice of the audience only, or not in the sense of as they are structured by the architectural space. Yeah, so they were contacted in a general way. Yeah, they were either contacted in a very, very personal way, if you see them right next to you and give them the banana. Yeah, that's a very particular way. And everybody else is as a general presence. When you have the light up, or shared light, then you can, well, you said the globe is too big. It is, but it's just on the limit of being just about the size where you can pick out anybody and have eye contact with them, so you can play them in. When you use light for artistic modification, like in the Emerice production, you can't do that. So you're back to the style of production that is a cross between a proscenium, that the convention is that I don't see you. Yeah, you are there as a general presence, and I need to animate you there, but I don't need to have contact. And
so orange tree is shared light, really.
Sorry?
Orange tree is nearly shared light.
But the convention is difficult. So it's do the plays at the Orange Tree work through eye contact with the audience?
Maybe not.
I mean, the audience is so close at the Orange Tree that it just spills over.
So there's a spill.
It's not a,
yeah. So there's a
it's
spill
similar
like
to here, the same that we said here.
Yeah, but the way this works is that if the convention is, even though there's a spill, like at the Swan Theatre or the Orange Tree or things like that, if the convention is that I'm not meant to see you, I'm aware that you're there, yeah, as an actor, but I'm not meant to acknowledge you in your specific person, then I build the imaginative reality of the play on the stage, and you're witnessing it, okay? As if you were part of that imaginative reality. When I have the light up, or it's uniform light or shared light, then, as Dr. Johnson says, about the theatre of his time in the 18th century, that the spectators are always in their senses, and they know very well that they are sitting in a theatre, okay? Because the audience area was lit as well. They know very well they're sitting in a theatre. So when you operate in shared light, then I have to use the acknowledgement that we are sharing this literal space, like this rehearsal studio. And I have to create a modified perception of it for you, or with you, in order to create this imaginative reality. Yeah? So, in the Orange Tree, for example, my imaginative reality, if I do it well, could go on regardless whether you're there or not. Yeah? At the Globe and other spaces like that, I must depend on you in different parts of the theatre, and I use you as a structural element of my imaginative environment, so that I could build this sensation for you that you are there. So in a certain sense, you would feel I know I'm here, and this is something else, different. Yeah. So an actor comes in, and you see that they're cold. Okay. It should make you feel cold in a little bit of way. Yes.
So I like what you quoted, that person who said the actors didn't move and I wasn't moved, which brings us back a little bit to classical pathos and classes. But when some Shakespearean actors went to Germany in the age of Shakespeare, to Danzig and Frankfurt, most of the German audience didn't understand a word, but they were actually entertained by the movements of the actors and, of course, the music, because those those troops went with quite a band, say a broken consort of musicians, and so they were entertained with the songs, the music, the jigs, from which German singspiel comes from. But when you mention gender parity, don't you think that in the age-greater era of Besselad Meyerhold and Stanislavski in 20th century Russian theatre, the Moscow Arts Theatre actually brought a real tramp on to play the part of a tramp. Now don't you think with this aim of absolute gender parity, one's in danger of going conflicting against nature, naturalism, realism, verisimilitude, verismo, freedom in dramatic art, truth, nature.
Truth and nature are not synonymous with naturalism and realism. I'm sorry.
And merit. You know, inevitably, there's going to be a time when it sort of conflict with merit.
Yeah, and it's a very different question, very difficult question, because when I went with an actor friend more than 10 years ago to see a production of the Globe that was a production, she said to me she was an actress. And no, a different one. But yeah, it could be any of those. But she said about a certain actor, I can still tell it's a bloke in skirt. You know, I can still it's a bloke in skirt. But there are other actors, other people who, for example, I think it's Toby. What's his surname? Who played Catherine in Henry V. Who was that strange effect that yes and no. Yes and no, but so you accepted him as producing a very not naturalistic effect, but a very strong effect that was appealing, and it was in suited the play. And one of my all-time favorites is from Richard II with Mark Rylance. I can't remember the name of the actor, but to my shame, who played the mother of, is it O'Mell? Who, yes, who comes in to appeal for her son to the king at the end of the play. It's online on YouTube, and you should watch it, because that's the other end of the spectrum. I know it's a bloke. And the way he plays, it's almost like a Dane in a pantomime, but not exactly. It's a different style, but there are strong overlaps with it. But but he's a totally good old woman. Excellent. And fantastic. Yeah.
Well, one of the most moving experiences I've ever had in the theatre was that all-male 12th night at the Globe 10 years ago. It was fascinating because I was right in the yard. I always go in the yard. I was right at the front, and there was a whole group of 15-year-olds from a big comprehensive school in Camberwell I know well, mainly Afro-Caribbean kids. They were laughing their heads off. They were killing themselves laughing. At the end, I was crying, you know, at the same time, because I'm old, maybe young, and the play is both. And as the act, you know, youth's a stuff will not endure. The rain, you know, when the play finished, these kids were pumping, you know, saying, "Man, that's the funniest play I've ever seen. Oh my God, man, I'm going to come back and see that play. It's so good. I'm going to get my mom to it." You know, they were absolutely cooking, you know. Tears were running down my cheeks, just so, you know, the presentation of, you know, because 12th Night is such a deeply touching play. And there was an elder, sorry?
Is it the same production revived in 2012?
Yeah. I mean, this is when it was first done. It didn't have Stephen Fry as Mulberry. And there was another couple, there was a couple coming towards me, and they were holding hands and they were crying. And we looked at each other, they walked towards me. And we looked at this bunch of 15-year-old kids laughing. And we looked at each other, and we looked at them, and we smiled. And we walked up to each other, and we hugged each other, me and this 70-year-old couple. And we looked at these kids. And it was because they were youth and we were age, and that's what the play is about. And it was touching to an extent that I find it, you know, hard to describe. But it happened in that space, in shared light, in the middle of the afternoon, with helicopters.
Was that particularly because of the so-called original practices approach of the play, or might those same kids not have responded in a not dissimilar they been Emma Rice's production of
That I don't know. I mean, that is obviously speculative. I'm just wanting to defend the traditional practices where, you know, I was moved because they moved, you know.
Yes,
And
because
ditto with the Hamlet. I mean, again, not Raleigh's Hamlet. I saw it both in the yard and in the Lord's room. Extraordinary moment. I mean, watching it from the Lord's room and back, when you kind of feel you're in this Renaissance court, you're watching this intrigue going on in front of you, which you'd seen from the yard. When Marx said in the second soliloquy, and he said, "Am I a coward?" And there was this kind of shudder in the audience, and people saying no, you know, because he was appealing to people he could see. He was making eye contact with the people in the yard and saying, you know, I mean, that wonderful line in that on scene 6, is it, my fate cries out, you know, when he's arguing with Horatio, he says, what if he'd tempt you towards the cliff, my lord, and beat, you know, blah, 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 and hand me, gentlemen, I'll make a ghost of him and lets me, my fate cries out. It's 4 monosyllables, and it means I've got to do it, and it's going to kill me, and I can't stop doing it because that's what I have to do. And it sort of tears your heart out, you know. So then when 30 minutes later Mark just looks at people and says, am I a coward?
Yes.
People wanted to, you know, they were being spoken to in the depths of their souls about, we are all people who have to say, how do I deal with the frightening things in life? And he's acting it for us.
Yeah, and it's really, it's an important distinction that he looked at the audience as you post the next movement in the book, because there was lots of audience contact, as you've seen in Midsummer Night's Dream, and you know, spraying with the water gun and so forth. But this would happen regardless almost what you react or who's there. You try to choose the audience member that would be more likely to take it, but it doesn't matter. It can go on. It has to go. With the shared light, when you move the action in a way that you play the eye contact and you, depending on the reaction, you expose yourself to the reaction that you're getting from that person, which is visible to everyone else, and you're seen to be taking this on and modifying it before you move forward with the next action. So with when there's no shared light, you don't expose yourself to that, and the production is moving on regardless, so to speak. When you have shared light, you as a production, as an actor, expose yourself to the danger of the feeding that you visibly get from the audience, and the other audience also sees this danger, and
that's what Sam was talking
you must be seen as an actor to be adapting to it and taking it on. And in a sense, this is what they pay for. Okay, they're not paying for seeing the same story again and again and again. After all, as the argument comes up in the criticisms about the current controversy as well, why Shakespeare wasn't adapted too? You know, everybody knew those stories and the histories and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but they come in for the physical acrobatics, but also for the technical acrobatics of you as an artist, where there's this constant danger going on. And I would suggest to you that the playwright is working with this as well. So if the play is good, then the playwright is already exploiting this possibility. So it's not only that Mark Rylance or somebody else was good at playing the space in that way, of exposing this adaptation, but the play itself is constructed in a way that it would play on these aspects. So setting up, so to speak, the actor in these conditions in order to fall into it. And then you and the audience has to see him fall into this trap and then working out of himself out of it to construct the play.
Can I ask a question, not really directly here, maybe switch the line of direction across to one of the other protagonists in this debate? And is the problem from the purist, the sort of like hesitating to call you an ideal, the purist point of view, actually to do with shared light? Is it about the relationship between
between the actor and the audience and the shared light, which is the problem. Because I've seen many productions there which have not particularly adopted original practices in terms of, many have in costume terms, but many have not. Many have in terms of props and so on, many have not. Many have not adopted the original practices of some of the stage machinery, some have, and so on and so on. So there has been a very variable diet over time. But is it the shared light that is the problem?
You put the ball in my court, and I have first of all to respond to, because it's been mentioned several times, the reporting, or I would call it misreporting, of my statement in the stage. It's important to put this on record that it was, I thought, a gross example of bad journalism. I was approached by the stage to make a statement on the events at the Globe, and I did so on the condition that it was understood that I had absolutely no view on Emma Rice or the decision that she would leave the Globe, nor was I qualified to make that statement. This caveat was omitted from the article as it was reported, so that it appeared to be an intervention on my part, when in fact it was a response to a completely unsolicited question from the stage. At that point, I had no idea that I would be the only person reported on the front page of the stage as taking this view. So it was presented as if I was in fact objecting to a decision that was made for reasons that I absolutely could not speak about. What I said was that I thought that the Globe had a responsibility as one of a family of historic reconstructions that includes this theatre and Stanton, Virginia, to fulfill its educational remit. And an important part of that educational remit, I said the core of that educational remit, should be authentic productions. In as close as possible to the historical conditions as the most up-to-date research allowed. I was very much speaking from this point of view, that's to say, which we've already had represented on our screen from Sam Wanamaker, that actually one of the counterintuitive aspects of this debate is that it's the latest research on historical reconstruction that is the last thing, whereas the conventional, if you like, modern dress production is now old hat. And this rather counterintuitive aspect of the story, that the authentic production defamiliarizes, has been a running theme through this afternoon's discussion and through Ildico's presentation. So I was speaking very much from my experience of many productions at the Globe, where I've been impressed by the sense that what the Globe is doing in attempting to achieve as close as possible the historical circumstances of an original performance creates an experience that is much more of an event than a conventional reproduction of simply Shakespeare's text. I know directors who object to the Globe space on professional grounds, beautifully encapsulated, I think, by David Thacker's objection, that you will never see a production, in his words, at the Globe that is more important than more interesting than the building. Because one is always conscious that this postmodern experience, this event, is a distracting one, in which we are continually distracted by the overwhelming presence of the theatre itself and the audience in that theatre. And what I love, and always have done, about the Globe experience is that we are caught up in the unique event of an evening which will culminate in the jig and a kind of orgasmic crescendo, in which an audience from all over the world is experiencing the uniqueness of that moment and the intensity of that event, many of them giving the impression that they've never been in a theatre before in their lives and may not ever do so again, which is specific to that space and that occasion, and that depends upon the shared light. and the experience of community that we all celebrate. Having said that, I was lucky enough to see Twelfth Night in the Mark Rylance production that we've already spoken about at both the Globe and the Middle Temple on the 400th anniversary of the original production at the Middle Temple. And one of the aspects of both of those spaces intensified at the Middle Temple was the sense of alienation in being in the presence of Elizabethan costume and authentic performances, and this particular production, under Jenny Tirmani's design, took the authenticity to extremes. I know that the original underwear with corsets, whalebone corsets, was used in order to induce in the actors, as much as possible, the uncomfortable experience of being present in, at the original performance. Temple with the all-male production and Mark Rylance's eerie and uncanny performance in travesty, alienating and distant and in all kinds of ways remote from our experience. But what this created was a sense of defamiliarization that had, I think, profound resonances for what I know interests a lot of people around this table, which is the extraordinary and perhaps unique dialectic between Shakespeare's originality and Shakespeare's universality. This alienation that we experience in the presence of whalebone corsets and all-male casts has something to speak to our own concerns about what it is that makes Shakespeare universal. It must be very similar to the experience of the No theatre and other forms of authentic drama around the world. And it raises all kinds of questions about universality that we are able to experience across this great gap of time and these utterly unfamiliar performance practices. The humanity that you have spoken of seemed to me the absolute essence of the experience. And it would be, I think, disastrous to lose that.
Can I just add a footnote to that? Sorry. I'll try not to say much more, but there was a Pericles at the Globe about a dozen years ago that I was very disappointed by, which precisely didn't do that, which, I mean, the bloke playing Gower, whose name I forgot, kept on ad-libbing, except they weren't ad-libs, turning to the audience and making facetious remarks about Saddam Hussein's underpants and all kinds of stuff, but that annoyed me. And the bawdy in the brothel scene was kind of grotesquely, pushing bolts in and out of bolts and talking about extra virgin olive oil and stuff. I mean, don't need that. But the thing that really, really annoyed me about it was that from time to time the actors were turning to the audience and commenting on their own role. And for example, I can't remember her name, Pericles' wife's father. Simonides. He's talking about what a pearl and virtuous woman she is. And she turns to him and says, he's always going on like that. It's so embarrassing. And that, it just reduced it to kind of trivia to me. I thought, we're grown-ups. We don't need to be, pretended to as if this is sort of stuff we're going to watch on the telly, as if it's the Archers, I don't know. It didn't have that profoundly humane. It was a different, wrong kind of alienating.
By chance, and perhaps coincidence that Providence provided, I saw the modern dress production of Twelfth Night in the Blackfriars, Virginia, last Saturday night. That was preceded by a kind of meta-theatrical introduction, which I thought was absolutely true to the kind of meta-theatre that dramatists, not only Shakespeare, Beaumont and Fletcher particularly, foregrounded the performance with. They introduced the play with a kind of comic routine, almost brush up your Shakespeare, by two actors who were framing the action within the alienating effect of an Elizabethan performance with, after all, many T-shirts. And of course, we had the American election on our minds very much in Stanton, Virginia last weekend. So I think the kind of effect that you're speaking about, and that actually through you, can be used, as I think it's used at Stanton, very successfully, in order to induce an awareness of the audience's own responsibility in creating the illusion that Ildiko has suggested is absolutely essential to the experience.
Yes, absolutely. And on that note, let me, as we finish up, short outline, which is containing and structuring the audience, and that has, through its artistic use, actual political effect, because you're there as an audience. Maybe this is the key of it. You're there in your social presence. When you're there at a production where this is not the convention for me to notice you, unless you're really near me, then you're not there as an audience mass in your social presence. You're there as a nondescript presence. In shared life spaces, that's the underlying condition. You're there as a social presence.
Mm-hmm.
And
could I just add one thing, because it's important to put it on record, about the difference between the Globe production of Twelfth Night and the Blackfriars one that's running at the moment. The Blackfriars one is done, I called it modern dress, but it's actually done in 1920s costume. It's done as if it's P.G. Wodehouse. So throughout, one feels they are all assets. They are all 1920s bright young things. But the peculiar quality of the Elizabethan production, especially that Mark Rylance one, was to give Twelfth Night a tragic dimension. That these were all human, living people like us once.
yes, absolutely.
I mean, it's interesting. You made the point of alienation that doesn't work, alienation that does work, alienation that doesn't work. I don't think you can get you couldn't write a compendium of that which works and that which doesn't work. You can only test it in practice. You can only find out in rehearsal and in performance very often. I mean, I can remember sort of I was at the Peterborough Midsummer Night's Dream when it's and that was fantastic. It might have been a complete farce, and a lot of people thought it was going to be. Actors even left the company thinking it was going to be, thinking he was a tedious old bore. And of course, it became, I suppose, the groundbreaking production of the 20th century.
Yeah.
I'm also delighted to for the first time to have in the flesh post-factual, the victim of post-factual commentary, Richard Wilson. Excellent.
Trumpery.
Trumpery.
We know what belongs to a frippery.
So,
the trumpery in the wardrobe.
Absolutely. So to show you the basic condition of this visible audience mass that I was talking to you about, we need to go to the Firefox. Yeah. And the second clip. Yeah. You've seen this, but this is only 2 minutes, and you can't see it enough times. Watch the space from the actor's point of view as he comes in and invades it and sees everyone around, and the sense of that tension, tangible tension in the space. The invading the space. complexity of the audience. Okay, that's enough. Thanks. And if you could go back to the presentation, please. Thanks. Yes, so the important thing about that clip, the reason I say you can't see it enough times, this particular bit, is that there's a basic condition that the Elizabethan actors and Jacobean actors were working with, and that is that sensation in movement of coming into this shared social space, which is shared architecturally in 3 dimensions and in the social presence of the audience. You can see them all, and it's not Shakespeare's plays are not stand-up comedy, but a stand-up comedian friend of mine said once that I asked him how he works, what it's like, and he said, you walk into the relationship with the audience. You don't create it. You live or die by the recognition that you're walking into it and recognize their presence. Otherwise, you're pelted and you go off and you fail. And because of the shared light, I think that one of the basic conditions that we're working with is walking into that shared social presence, and as an actor, you modify it by working with it. And this is really important to see this. Now, I know that this is an imaginative reconstruction, so it's a film, yeah? It's not real life, it's not an experiment, scientifically speaking, but one thing that you can see in it that you can't see anywhere else is the one thing that the Globe hasn't been able to do so far, which is reproduce the audience density. For simple health and safety reasons, they were not allowed to do that. And that is really, really important. I say that to you as a performer, that the artistic effect is very, very different if you have gaps in the audience, or if the audience is in a certain part of the space and not anywhere else, like at the Globe, because...
And they're not smelly.
Well, the important thing with the underwear and the smell is that, as I said in the beginning, there's a hierarchy of effects. The most important is the spatial one. The smell and everything else can be added in if you like, yeah, and the underwear. But the most important configuration that we need to experiment with, and that's why the Globe was built on other projects, is the spatial configuration, right? So your effect depends on that very much, and the next most important would be the density of the audience mass that you see. Yeah, very, very different from sparsity and density. So that's why it's an interesting imaginative recreation of that. So what I suggest is that productions like Emma Rice's or other directors are producing plays in different styles could and should be done in spaces like the Globe, using it in various sorts of ways. But as I said before, it would be important to use it, and we owe it to ourselves and to the reconstruction itself, to use it as a given constraint, as well as see how we can work it and what new questions it makes us ask. And the new questions that these spaces make us ask for is, the branch they study it is research through practice in performance, or in another work with the PAR, practice as research, or research through practice in production. The name changes all the time. So this is studying through the means of performance what is happening when we are producing plays in this context. So OP, original production, as a branch of practice as research. So we could even say that many of the misunderstandings or conceptual unclarities that still exist about the nature of these spaces comes from the fact that OP, original practices, as a practice, and the scholarly practice studying it, PAR, were contemporary in their development, right? They developed side by side, the object of study and the instrument of study, and that's why we are not very far with it yet. Okay, it wasn't that original practice came to being and there was already, we were fully equipped to study it. Now, we had literary means, we had philosophical means, and many other means, but not yet the means of a completely worked out branch of scholarly study that could study it in its own terms, and PAR, or research with practice in performance, or practice research, is that kind of study. So it's a really important aspect, and it's interesting to recognize that they were developed side by side, because something else that it means is that they can be catalytic or mutually encouraging to each other's development. Because the globe and globe type spaces are, performance theory calls them the most comprehensive of spaces, because they are fully visible in 3 dimensions, and all the other performance spaces that you know can be thought of as modifications of it, of the most comprehensive one. So in that sense, they can be, as scholars who were rebuilding the globe were proposing intuitively, but they didn't have the means yet to reason for it, that they could be test tubes for performance in general as well. Acting skills, performance skills, compositional skills, so lots of other ones. Now, to finish up, do you remember the scene from Henry IV Part 1 when Hal has said, after Getzel, when the robbery happened, and Hal has this long scene. First, he comes in with Ned, and he says, "Oh, I went to the drinking houses in London, and I know everyone." Timo, don't sit down. Don't sit down. Don't sit down. We don't.
You're a player.
You're a player. We don't do anything. So we will not say any lines whatsoever. It's just a very basic setup. If we were in a proscenium theatre, you are all sitting in that proscenium, and we are on the stage. So we have to create this scene between ourselves. And I'm relating to you my adventure that I met Tom again, Francis, and I know their language, and I could drink with a tapster, anywhere in London. And that would be between us. So we're sharing this adventure. And you are apart from it. You try to imagine it, but you're apart from it. So in that sense, I'm talking about my adventure, about people who are somewhere else in the imaginative reality. Yeah? Somewhere off stage, and you're witnessing this. But I'm not very complimentary about these people, if you remember this scene. Okay? Now, on the other hand, if we were in shared light, very much shared, can't see, then we don't need to do anything, but you are around us, then I'm telling you about my adventure, and I'm exposed on this stage, so I have to tell you about it the way I'm going on about it. So Tom, Dick, and Francis are not there somewhere, but they're out here. I know, I've seen a Tom, a Dick, and a Francis, and they are there and there and there, right? So what is happening is that I activate, enabled by the spatial setup. As an actor, I'm activating the social relationships I walked into with people. I don't know what your name, but I'm saying I'm a Tom and a Dick and a Francis. And because I'm not very complimentary about them, this creates almost like a stand-up comedy type situation. So instead of the proscenium effect, where your sensation of me is that I'm not a very nice person, as hell, because I'm calling these guys names and they think I'm their friend, yeah? But here is the opposite effect, because in stand-up, the comedian offending the audience is in fact a means of creating a bond. Yeah, because you're here in my theatre and you're still here, you assent to the fact of being insulted, okay, and that creates a bond between us. We know we're friends. Only friends let themselves insulted by the other. And as the scene develops, there's this famous scene with Falstaff, where 90% maybe of the Shakespearean insults come from that scene. So this is a very, very important one, or interesting effect. And then, yes, this is going to be just 2 seconds. trumpets.
to it.
You don't need to do it. You don't need to do anything. Remember that immediately after this, I proposed the jest with Francis, the tapster, the actual tapster, who comes on. So we are back to the proscenium, yeah, and you are here, yeah, and there's Francis, and I get him to chat with us about his, work and so forth. And you are meant to call on him all the time. But come here, it's like you're in another room. And he's meant to be set up to be saying a non-answer all the time. Okay? So, just a little bit further away. Yeah. On a proscenium, this is the way it's set up. It tends to come across, very broadly speaking, and hugely generalized, a cruel joke, which it is to some certain extent, yeah? But this is a joke that is happening in a very an imaginative reality that is apart from you, okay? So you're looking onto it, onto a separate imaginative reality that we're creating here on the stage. And that tends to have the effect that this poor guy is put upon, and he's the center one. If you come here. So, it's a very small space, but Timo is off stage, so to speak. Perfect. Okay. Come here. This is, as I said, a very, very tiny stage. So, this is a shared line one. Francis hears the calling from there, and I'm chatting to him, setting him up to stay here, which means that he's in, try to go in that direction, try to start going, and then come here immediately. Yeah. So he's suspended by the composition by Shakespeare, the conditions that he gives us to work with. I say anticipating this setup is that what you see would be a character in almost suspended animation, not knowing which way to go, because I'm making him to stay here, but he's having to go there because he's being called constantly, and then his boss comes in and says, "What are you doing, man? You're standing and not going anywhere, and here's such a calling," right? And then you sense that something is developing here, because later on, it's as the news of the war is coming in from the outside, it's somebody else, also an apprentice, who is in this situation, and that is, yeah. So there is some sort of an effect being built up by this that Shakespeare's engineering in order to for us to use the audience in a way that is building the not the meaning of the play, I don't like that word, the shape of the play that is driving at, yeah, by particular shapes. And you as an audience are here, we're sharing this joke, and here's one of you almost on stage, physically speaking. So again, I'm depending on you to recognize this through our previous interplay when I insulted you in all sorts of ways. And then later on, when just change places, and this is the last thing that I want to show you. Remember, as Falstaff comes on, he's relating his adventure, with the robbery, and it's a returning catchphrase of his, a plague on all cowards, right? And it's really, really interesting that he's talking of the coward that is hell, but also hell is being coward in a different sense of, or is he? It's a question. It's like that with Hamlet. Am I a coward? Or is it something else that is keeping me from, doing my job outside there? And the way that the audience is activated into this is that, remember how Falstaff is coming up with various numbers of people who attacked him. The two, that came in, and then immediately I put to death the other, the 7. And the 10 that attacked me before were already put to death when the other 13 came in. And if it's played on a proscenium where the audience don't see or are not part of this situation developing, then it's kind of like a silly joke. But when you are visible here, then the simple fact that he's coming up with different numbers is like he's being challenged on stage. But you said a different number now. If you see each other, I think the effect would travel, and would check with other audience around. Was it 12? Was it 1? Not literally speaking, so I wouldn't ask somebody. Maybe I would ask my friend, but I wouldn't ask somebody there. But I would certainly check. Like, what are these guys thinking on the balcony? Did he just say 7, or was it 8, or number 2? Yeah. So proscenium cuts you off from this effect. Whereas a shared light, shared space setup that the playwright was, I think, anticipating, builds this effect. And the reason why it's so important is not just for the joke, but remember that the play in the play that is put on within this same scene between Helen Falstaff and exchanging roles as son and king is vital for you as an audience, because it's about you, it's about your life. It's about, number one, the present war that is going on outside. Is Hell going to help with that? It's your prince now, right? And or, in the second half of that playlet, what is he going to be as king? Yeah? Because then in the second half he's playing his king, himself as king later on. So, in that way, through generating this really, really strong relationships between the audience, I think, and Ian McIntosh calls it relationship not between actor and audience, but between actor and audience. So perhaps that's what we will finish on, because that's the strongest expression of this relationship that needs to travel, and that's how the actor and the effect and the composition is reliant on the presence of the social presence of the audience to generate the effect. So thank you.
Stimulating stuff. We can't bring the curtain down. We can't take the lights down. We can stop.
Thank you, Frank. Just for those people who came late, could I just remind everybody that next week we have Sam Hall from Budapest, and the text is here on the table. It's a chapter of the book he's going to be talking about, which I think in many respects leads on from this afternoon's discussion, Shakespeare's Foolery. And we're asked to read the chapter in advance for next week, so that we have something to respond to.